Hi, it's Terrell Turner, and welcome back to the Finance and Accounting Show. Now, today we have another great guest on, and we're going to talk about something that is very key to accounting firms. And if you're in leadership at an accounting firm or you're an accounting firm owner, you definitely want to pay attention to this topic because there are so many things that people are struggling with trying to figure out the hard way. So we figured, why not bring an expert on that can provide some great insight to really take things to the next level. So stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest, Geraldine Carter. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Terrell. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I would say the pleasure is all mine now that we finally get to actually have a real conversation and not just like see each other in passing.
Yeah, totally. In the conference room, in the hallways at the conferences.
So I want to I want to give the audience a little bit of a chance to hear from you and describing kind of how would you describe what you do and who you do it for.
So I work with single owner CPAs who are overworked and want to go down to a 40-hour work week. I am not a CPA. I never will be, never wanted to be. Tax gives me hives. I have an engineering degree. So I come at this whole problem of the overworked CPA from a really different angle and find the component parts of what's causing overworking 60 hours a week when they want to be working 40 and solve it progressively in a way that predictably, reliably gets CPAs down to 40 hours, then down to 25 hours, then down to 15 hours if they want to go that far.
Okay, awesome. I love it. Now, what type of engineering is your background?
So I changed majors a lot, and where I landed was civil and environmental engineering. But truth
Okay,
be told, I
nice.
mean, like, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I was going to grow up. So I just got my engineering degree, got in and got out. And I was like, okay, check, done.
The interesting, well, I'll say the good thing is that I think an engineering degree prepares you for so many different opportunities, so many different avenues. Just because I spent a lot of my corporate career working with, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, process engineers. And I will say the lessons I learned from the engineers have been like invaluable in every area moving forward. So, from yourself, like when you're talking about, helping, accounting firm owners figure out, that puzzle of how do I fix the things that I'm probably doing wrong or things I'm doing inefficiently. When you start to work with someone, like, do they come to you because they are like, hey, I know there's a better way to do it? Or how does like that initial conversation usually happen with you?
So, most often, what they experience is just that they're swamped and they've been swamped
Got it.
for years, especially since COVID. And they perhaps didn't do a series of price increases over COVID years because they just got buried or they felt bad for people. And prices become suppressed. They need to take on more clients. They take on more clients. They need more work. So they hire more staff. Hire more staff. Now they need more clients. Prices are still too low and they end up in this downward spiral and they get stuck. And at some point, they reach a breaking point where they crack and they're like, oh my gosh, something has to change. Or I'm just going to walk away from this whole thing. And I don't want to do that because this is my retirement. So can you help? And the challenges that need fixing are usually pretty straightforward, right? We need to disengage, probably multiple rounds, not all at once. We need to get your pricing. We need to fix multiple problems of pricing. There's more than just one pricing problem. And we probably need to standardize and systematize and get you working much more efficiently than you currently are. You're probably super inefficient, even though you're an organized person because your notifications are on, your email inbox is a disaster zone, and your staff are coming to you for all kinds of questions you think they should know the answer to. And all of those problems are fixable. We just need to prioritize them and just move through them in series.
What? I think that that is a huge benefit because I think about like, over the past probably couple months, we've been going through this massive, what I call re engineering of our processes. And one of the things that we've kind of been finding is that some of the changes we've been making, when I introduce the change to the team, they're kind of like, oh man, we should have been doing this the whole time. And I'm wondering for you is as you're working with different firms, as you start introducing them to the ways to improve that efficiency, is it like an aha moment or is it like a wow, I had no idea that I could, adjust it this way?
So I think a couple things, and I'll tell my own story of this just to normalize it. And that is, I'm a certain age, I'm 48. And when I was in school, we had the Macs that you put the little floppy disk inside. And there was no conversation on how do you organize digital information when you receive it. And we just grew up in this era of computers. We were just like thrown to the wolves, go figure it out. And I think of myself as a fastidious, tiny, organized, anal person. And I thought for sure I was running my business in an optimized way. Plus, I'm an engineer, right? And like on a scale of 1 to 10, I thought for sure I was an 8. And I was until I got introduced to David Allen's Getting Stuff Done. Plus, I think it's Merlin, I can't remember his last name, Inbox Zero. And I put those two things together with some help. And it turns out that the scale goes to 100, right? I had so much more room to go up in terms of efficiency, productivity, optimization, which doesn't mean more output. It just means doing the same output with less energy. And I find that most of my clients, just like me, were missing a few key pieces of where to put their digital information, right? So information comes in, and because they don't have the right buckets for it, they just leave it in their inbox. Instead of having a projects bucket, instead of having a reference bucket, instead of having a maybe someday list, they just don't have sufficient buckets. And once we give them the right buckets for the information that they get and everything goes into the right buckets, suddenly now information flows freely and it doesn't get backed up anywhere and it doesn't bog down any systems. So now accounting is super complex. There are a lot of details going on and down to the minutia of like penny rounding and date transposition. But above that, you still have your day-to-day workflow and your workload, and getting that to run smoothly and to not and for information not get backlogged in your inbox or wherever it might be or wherever other, places that you have inbox trays, if you will, makes a massive difference. So giving CPAs a holistic system where they can run their day-to-day so much more effectively and productively without constant backlog and getting bogged down really opens the floodgates to productivity, and they stop using their brains to remember and they're using their brains to remember and instead they use their brains to think, which is what your brain is best used for. So that's just one aspect of just how helpful that work is to do if a person hasn't done it already. And once they have it done, then it's done. You know how to do it and you can use it forever.
I think that's very interesting because as you were talking through that, I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, you know what? We spend years and years getting trained to develop our technical skill. But most accountants that I've met, even when I think about my own, approach, is like we spent like almost zero time training to be more efficient or training to be, more effective, with the same amount of effort. And I was like, you know what? There's so much of what you said that I'm just like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Like, why wasn't that the common way of thinking?
I could tell you why. And the answer is, I think this is an important shift, is that, we grow up getting educated to do a certain skill with the presumption that we're going to do that skill for somebody else and get paid by an employer. So we try and become as good as we can at the skill so that we can get paid as much as possible by the employer who's paying us. And then when we hang our shingle and become a business owner, the tables turn 180 degrees and we usually don't recognize it. So we think that we're getting paid for the skill as a business owner. We're like, sweet, I'm not making my boss rich anymore. I didn't like working for that guy anyways. And now I'm just getting paid myself. And isn't that great? Because now I'm free to set my hours, which is great up until the CPA is full. And then when the CPA is full, they're like, crap, I'm full. Now what do I do? And they want to make more money, and they're like, well, if I want to make more money, then I guess I need more clients, and if I need more clients, that's more work and I need more employees. I need to hire. So they make their first hire and then they just keep hiring and hiring, right? And they go down that road of the business model. And what happens at that inflection point where they go from thinking that their skill and their craft is the thing that matters to owning a business, suddenly your skill and your craft is like just a piece of the pie. Like it's so not a big deal anymore. It's just presumed to be sufficient. And the things that matter now in terms of your business and getting the revenue and the time and the freedom and the autonomy, the flexibility that you want when you hang your shingle is no longer down to your skill set. And it is down to countless other things that that have nothing to do with that have very little to do with your technical expertise. I just did a
Mhm.
study of my top 10 fastest moving clients, and nowhere in there was accounting expertise.
I find I laugh because it's one of those things that I recently spoke at North Carolina State University, and one of the questions they asked me about was like, "What does your day to day look like?" And I told them, I was like, "You know what? I'm a CPA, but I spend a small percentage of my day doing accounting work."
Yeah.
I was like, I spend more time like whether it's hiring or meeting with the team, like looking at the development track for every employee just to make sure, like, hey, do they have the right type of assignments and do they have the right goals to help them go from where they are to the next stage? And then also just looking at the processes, like, how do we improve our on time delivery? And the students looked shocked. And I was like, you know what? It's probably because, like, when you're training to be an accountant, like, you're really trained to focus on what you said is to do a good job for another company, not necessarily to be the person who creates the company where other people are doing the technical work. So, I mean, I think that's brilliant what you shared.
Yeah, and it's borne out in the numbers, right? And I can see across the clients who I observe, and I have the privilege of being able to observe them over time, and they come in very different stages of growth and with different problems, but always the overarching problem of I'm working way more than I want to be. Yes, it would be nice if I made more money. Who doesn't want to make a little bit more money? It would be great. I'd love to go on vacation and, fly first class, but whatever, really what I need is to stop working so much. And the factors that drive that transition most quickly are niching, pricing, and delivering efficiently, right? So create value for your people. Do that by niching, you create expertise. Price that work effectively and then deliver efficiently. And keep your head on straight. You have to have a good mindset. You have to have the fundamentals in place and you have to have a good mindset. If you are missing one or the other, progress will be super slow. So among the people who I work with who have observed move the fastest progress, the people who have the fastest progress are the ones who nail the fundamentals and have a strong mindset and get regular mindset coaching. It is not the people who are fanciest in accounting. And I mean, yes, of course there are many drivers to success in business, but at a high level, those are the factors that make the biggest difference.
Nice. I love it. So I'm curious if a person is, they're leading their firm, they're thinking about like, man, I'm loving the things that Geraldine is saying. How in the world do I get in touch with her if I want to work with her? So how do people find you and get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
Yeah. So for people who like what are picking up what I'm putting down, which is, you've got to create value for clients more than anything. The thing that I want them to know if they're just starting out is that you do not get paid for performing work over time for your clients. You get paid for value creation. And that's what you need to learn how to price effectively. And I think that's the biggest worldview shift that needs to take place first. And I talk all about that on my podcast, which is the Business Strategy for CPAs podcast. And then if they like all those concepts and they want to read it instead, I also have a Stop Working Weekends 5-day email course, which people can get at my website, which is at geraldinecarter.com.
Nice. I love it. I love it. Now, on the social media platforms, are there any content that you post out there that people can keep their eye out for?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, but that's the only place. And admittedly, I'm a lurker. So I don't, most of my content goes onto my podcast and in my daily email. I have a daily email for CPAs so that I can drip out these contents so that people can absorb this content in a daily fashion. So I'm on LinkedIn, but just know that I lurk there.
I love it. Now, are there any, because we usually see each other at conferences. So, are there any conferences that are on your list for this year that we can look out to look for you at?
Well, I can't commit to anything, but I had a I had a great time at Digital CPA last year in the fall and QuickBooks Connect. So those would be fall is the best time. Summertime is just too nice to be inside of a conference. So those would be the two places to keep an eye out. And I always love meeting people. It's really fun to get to talk to CPAs in person because, as you can see from my background, I live in the middle of nowhere.
Gotcha. Well, Geraldine, it has been a pleasure to have you on. I'm glad we got to dive a little bit more into your, what you do and how you deliver that and the value that you bring. And Two final questions. For if you were talking to someone and said, "Hey, I was on the finance and accounting show with Terrell and we had a great conversation. Hey, you should go back and listen to my episode. And hey, here are two big things that you should take away from that episode." What would your two big takeaways be?
Thinking that revenue comes from clients is like thinking that time comes from your watch. So remember, revenue comes from value creation. And now go deliver efficiently. That is it. It's all you need to know.
I love it. I love it. And then one final time, where can people find your website to look at your podcast and also to join your daily email list?
Yeah. So GeraldineCarter.com. From GeraldineCarter.com, you can get to all those places. And the podcast is Business Strategy for CPAs, which is available in all the podcast players.
Awesome. Well, Geraldine, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Terrell. Thanks so much for having me.